Welcome to the first audit committee of the year, and the new member, Councillor Benson. Welcome. A reminder that this meeting is being live streamed. Item 1, apologies for absence, have been received from Councillor Thornton. Councillor Hart, your substitute. Hello. Item 2, the minutes of the meeting of the 26th of January. Have you all had a chance to have a look, and are they all agreed? Everybody happy? Where's item 4?
Item 4 is the council, so it should not take paper, that's what it is.
Here we go. Item 4, the first of our annual reports is the Counter Fraud and Investigation Annual Report 2022-23. Mike Deneen, would you like to present this item?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. As you can see, item agenda number 4 is the Counter Fraud and Investigation Annual Report for 22-23. I won't go through the report word for word. I'm sure most people will have read it, and I'll just go through the salient points. The work of the service is led by the Counter Fraud team, and we are based at Thurrock. And we cover the work that is required for Castle Point through our SLA with the council. Now, Appendix A outlines the progress made in delivering our agreed counter fraud proactive work plan, with Appendix B being this year's plan. Obviously, that plan can change given the circumstances of the council and any internal requests that might be made. However, they will be changed at the direction of the 151 officer, and it will be brought back to this committee moving forward. This year, the CFI have continued to conduct their investigation post-pandemic, and we have noticed a general downturn in the referrals made to the team. It's a number of reasons, but it is hoped that this year, with our dedicated resource and our intention to integrate ourselves with a number of different departments, not just necessarily housing, that our services will come proven to be very, very useful. CFI last year received 6 suitable investigation referrals. We received 10 that were not suitable for investigation and closed. We received 10 that were not suitable for investigation and closed. We have 6 current investigations, and that is at the time of writing, just to point out, and those valued are 301,800. As well as that, as well as the investigations, the investigation team will also visit properties throughout the year where we have a suspected incident of fraud happening, or where we want to conduct a tenancy audit. And last year they visited 43 separate properties to ensure the appropriate people were living in the appropriate houses. Through the work, we did do 2 sanctions, which are legal sanctions, and then we had 1 house that was recovered as well through the recovery process. We've worked alongside the housing management team, and last year we did have 2 days of action in which a number of properties were knocked on whilst we worked with the local housing team and the local policing team. Out of that operation, coincidentally, and one of the reasons we like doing it is that an individual was arrested because they were wanted on warrant by the police. So it's not only fraud that we play a part in, but it's also general criminality that can be identified through some of the work we do with the teams here at the council. And like I say, over 30 properties were visited over those 2 days with everyone involved. We intend to do that again next year, which is in the work plan. In terms of financial impact, the CFI cost the council £68,000 per annum, and this year, with the recovery of the property valued at £23,500, we're at a cost of £44,500. I intend to obviously reduce that deficit quite significantly next year in the hope that we will recover some more properties, and then also with the court time allowing for us to take further action as well, because that's delayed quite a lot moving forward. I don't want to read every paragraph within the report, and I'm sure people have got questions for me, so I'll leave it there and I'll open it up to the chair and then the committee for questions.
Councillor Anderson.
I'm not sure if this is relevant or not, but court time, what's the problem with court time, please?
When we take people to court for fraud, obviously you have to be heard in the Crown Court, and sometimes it's quite difficult for us to get cases to the Crown Court within a quick time period, because obviously there's a backlog at the moment. So what I'm hoping next year is that we will get some cases go through to the Crown Court, and we will be able to prosecute individuals where the offence has been made out. Obviously, we're not chasing just anybody.
Councillor Aycott.
Do you deal with matters regarding private landlords?
Private landlords, it would depend on the effect on the council. So what we wouldn't be involved in is a private landlord-tenant dispute, which is away from the council's interests. It must have the council's interests at heart.
Thank you, Chairman. If I remember rightly, you do Grays, us and Southend, is that right?
No, we do Grey, Thurrock and here now.
Okay, thank you. And is there any difference in the fraudulent activities between the two boroughs at all, or is it pretty much pretty standard? Because you don't just do housing, you do all kinds of fraud, don't you?
Yeah, we'll look at any form of economic crime against the council. That's here and at Thurrock. Both councils are obviously extremely different in size and nature, but that doesn't distract us from the fact that we'll deal with any kind of economic crime.
My question was, is there any kind of, do you find the same kind of frauds in that council, in that borough that is in this borough?
We find similarities. There are areas of Thurrock Council that obviously don't operate here. For instance, adult and children's social care. So obviously we don't find that here. But where the departments that are shared, let's say, both show exactly the same kind of frauds. Fraud is not a new crime, and it's not overly complicated in its thought process. People try to get the money out of the system where they can, and obviously in particular departments, it's more prone to others.
You said that at Grays you do these adult social and children's social care side as well. Because that, for us, comes under Essex, who does that kind of fraud? If you find that kind of fraud in Grays, there must be a fraudulent activity that's possibly in this area. Who does that for us, or is it done by Essex County Council direct and we don't know anything about it?
Although I don't know the answer to your question, I would take a very good educated assumption that the Essex County fraud team would deal with that for you on your behalf, and they would report that to Essex County Council.
Thank you. I just noted in the report you said there's an instance where an individual started a housing application, but on being told the application was being referred to the fraud team, the application was withdrawn. I just got to wonder, why would you tell somebody that you're kicking off a fraud investigation? Sometimes
for that exact reason. Just our interaction with individuals may put a stop to a crime that may happen, because we're not certain something has happened. It will take a whole investigation to do that, and if we have that if we suspect that, and we're working alongside the team sometimes the very best action we can take is early preventative work. And that way then we don't cost the authority the expense of taking someone through an investigation, through the court process, etc., where we may not actually recoup our monies. So sometimes the best action is preventative.
Thank you.
The 23,500 savings you were talking about, which is a good figure. When we take them to court and they're found guilty, do we get our costs back through that?
It's a good question, and sometimes you can get full costs, other times you won't get any. And it really does vary on the defendant that you've actually prosecuted. So cost is generally regarded as a means test by the court, and therefore sometimes we will get the cost back through legal fees, and the other times we don't. The only other option for us available to a criminal investigator is the use of the Proceeds of Crime Act, and that would entail another confiscation hearing, and it is a separate process. But if people have assets, then that's the route we would look to take to recoup any monies either lost or has allowed them to benefit.
Councillor Edwards?
Can I just raise a brief point of order?
You may.
Have we got any remote attendees at this meeting?
Yes, Chairman, you have. The External Auditor is attending remotely this evening.
And as we've not got the allowance of the coronavirus legislation saying that we can have remote meetings, are we allowed to do that?
That's an offer. That's a support service. It's not an elected member. It's the elected members who need to be present.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Anyone else? Any questions? Councillor Aycott?
Do you deal with people with non-payment of council tax or late payment? Or thank you.
In general terms, non-payment of a debt isn't passed to the fraud team, simply because that's regarded as a debt issue as opposed to a criminal act. There are instances where that can turn into a criminal act, and I would expect to get a referral through, but in general terms, we wouldn't deal with people in a debt programme, for instance.
Anybody else? Any further questions? Everybody's happy? Yep. Good. Yep. The committee is the recommendation agreed with this? Agreed. Thank you, Mike. I hope we can see that your continued success in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Next one is item 5.
Item 5, Internal Audit Service, the Head of Internal Audit's Annual Report. Andrew Barnes, would you like to present your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this is my annual report that draws together all of the work that we've delivered in respect of the 2022-23 financial year and reports to you my conclusion about what that means for the adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's risk management, internal control and governance processes. This in turn assists the committee with providing its own view on those arrangements and ensuring that these are appropriately reflected in the Council's annual governance statement that will be reported and published as part of the Council's financial statements for the year, and that you'll be considering later in the agenda this evening. So my actual annual internal audit opinion for the year is shown at section 3 of the report, and this concludes that improvements are required in respect of our governance arrangements and our utilisation of risk management to ensure it's consistent across the organisation. It reflects that there have been and will continue to be significant challenges faced by the Council, both as a result of external factors affecting the Borough arising from the work to recover from the pandemic and the impact of the current economic shocks being experienced by the country as a whole, as well as a period of more potential change for the organisation itself with the transformation programme that's underway and the resultant impact on the way the Council will work that will arise from that. The issues that I've highlighted are recognised by management and work is being undertaken to address these, all of which is reflected in the annual governance statement. Section 4 of the report provides a supporting commentary for the reasons for my opinion. and they provide a high-level summary of the results of the audit and other work that we've undertaken during the year. And these reflect on the arrangements to manage the organisation under the headings of managing the business, where we've considered the risk management arrangements, project management arrangements, workforce management, transformation, procurement, ethical governance, business continuity and cyber incident management. And the very high-level results of that work is in the report. The consideration of the service delivery risks are presented under the key corporate priorities. So under the environment section, we considered the arrangements around the review of options for the waste and recycling services. And under place, we undertook work on the housing, health and safety compliance in its landlord responsibilities, the arrangements to manage fire safety of the housing stock, and the corporate approach to estate and asset management. And support work was provided in respect of the approach to managing the King Knightswick Centre. Work that we did on the key financial systems that manage the council's finances and provide the information that will be reported in the financial statements was focused on the general ledger and the income and receipting and banking systems for the year. We also undertook work on grant claims that the council has made for funding being provided with. We've done that for a variety of grant funding streams, and we were able to provide the required assurances to the funding providers that the council has utilised the funding in accordance with the expectations of those funding bodies. Section 5 of the report reflects on the status of the audit team and how we've complied with the professional expectations of us to demonstrate to the committee that it's appropriate for you to take assurance from the work that we've done and the head of internal audit opinion that I've provided. As we previously discussed, we're finding it very tough to find suitable staff for the team. Various recruitment exercises have been undertaken during the year, and eventually that's found as 3 new members of staff that have joined the team in the last couple of months. Obviously, it's going to take some time to get them fully integrated into their roles, but we're working to gel as a team so that we can continue to provide an effective service to the council. In respect to the work from the audit plan that was agreed with the committee last year, we completed 71% of the planned work, which provides a solid base of evidence with which to form my opinion. The current status of each piece of work from that audit plan is shown in Appendix A to the report, and Appendices B and C provide the committee with the results of the assessment of compliance that the team demonstrates against the internal audit standards, as well as the action plan to deliver further improvements during the course of the next year. That's all I want to say, Chair, as introduction, but happy to take any questions members may have.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Andrew? Councillor May.
This is just a general question. It might not be equivalent, but does Sandy Bay have an effect on this?
In what way would you expect Sandy Bay to have an effect?
Well, as we know that the people that bought Sandy Bay off the Kings are £3 billion in debt, and there's a lot of caravans over there that have got residents in it, which when that's enforcement, because they've lived in the area for a certain amount of time, they come under us. So, and what I've been told over a number of years, that other authorities have put residents in Sandy Bay. So if other authorities have put them in there, and now this is going to be landed on us, couldn't we go to them to get some finances off them?
That's not an issue I know anything about at the moment, so we can take that away and find out more about it if that would be useful.
Okay.
Chief Executive, I understand you can help with this one.
Thank you, Chair. So the issue is in relation to the demand around any homelessness and therefore the homelessness budget that the council has. That's not something that has been considered, Councillor May, as part of this audit process. It's a key risk that is associated with that particular service. It may well be, given changes in recent events, that that comes to the top of our pile for this forthcoming municipal year.
The only reason I brought it up, as I said, I was quite concerned that other authorities have put people over there, and this authority will end up, obviously, with the costs.
Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chairman. The question I've got is the loan we lent to Grays, has that been repaid? I remember when I was on audit a few years back, it came up as a discussion about, I don't think it was the Greys one, it was another, we lent to someone else, and the audit committee was told it's a safe thing to do, and I understand it is a safe thing to do. But the question is, has it come back yet? And are we likely to continue lending money? Because I know it's a good investment to other authorities if that arises. Thank you.
Chairman, if I may, that's a Treasury management issue, and actually there will be a report to the next audit committee on the Treasury management. So that
It has been discussed in previous audit meetings, so is it not a subject for audit whether we are going to continue lending to other people?
the answer is that loan has been repaid.
And in future, are we still considering lending to other? It's guaranteed. The way I understand it, it's a guaranteed thing. So if we make money out of it, then surely we need to.
If I may, Chair, through you, the issue is one of Treasury Management, Councillor Hart, so it therefore isn't related to the Internal Auditor's annual report and would be part of the subject matter of next meeting's agenda. But as Ms Horgan has confirmed, the inter-authority loan was paid on time and with interest. The continuing inter-authority loan perspective is a matter of Treasury Management and will come to committee, as I say, on the next occasion.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. The councils are currently undergoing a transition process and some significant structural change. Have you been able to work hand in hand with that process at this stage to make sure that the audit plan is ahead of that, or are we going to have to rejig the audit plan and the workload as that proceeds?
So yeah, absolutely. We have been involved from the outset of the transformation programme. I've had meetings with the people that are running that programme, and we've developed terms of reference to specifically do work, and it's going to be phased in terms of the setup and the governance arrangements to make sure it works and is project managed effectively. And then as it's progressing in terms of the actual effectiveness and the delivery of what's been set out at the beginning. So yeah, absolutely, we are working sort of hand in glove with the team that are doing that.
I expected no less, but thank you for confirming.
Thank you, Mr Barnes. It'll be good to see your reports being progressed through as we go along. Is the recommendation agreed? Agreed. Item 6 is the annual governance statement. Ben Book, would you report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So this is a report to present the annual governance statement for the 2022-23 financial year to the committee. Just looking at the report itself, it just gives a little bit of background behind the report, the reason for the report. So section 2.1 of the covering report here just sets out the responsibility for ensuring there's a sound approach to governance, risk management and controls rests with the council. And it's required to report on this annually via the annual governance statement, which we were looking at this evening, which is then published with the financial statement of accounts. The council has delegated responsibility for the monitoring and reporting on the adequacy of these arrangements to the audit committee, which is why this report is coming to yourselves. So the ask this evening really is just to make sure the committee is satisfied that the annual governance statement is consistent with its views of the council's systems based on assurance presented throughout the year. Now, I should point out that ordinarily there would be two what we call governance monitoring reports which come into the audit committee, which would effectively allow you to sort of track progress against all of these key business processes that I'll talk about in a moment in the statement. In the 2022-23 financial year, there was only one governance report presented, and that came in January 2023. Due to insufficient business for the planned audit committees back in November 2022 and March 2023 with cancellations of those meetings. So it was a bit of an unusual year, and I think, I appreciate that the ask for you to, check that the report in the annual governance statement is sort of consistent with reports that you've had. You've only had that sort of one report basically, but there's a lot of detail within the annual governance statement which will hopefully give you a good understanding of kind of what we're presenting there and the assessments that we've come to within the annual governance statement. So there is a recommendation with this that the committee approves the annual governance statement 2022-23 and subject to any further amendments from external audit, approves its inclusion in the financial statements for 2022-23. If I may, Chair, I just want to run through a few key parts of the report itself, because it is quite a lengthy document, but there's, I think, a lot of good information in there, and I think I'll just sort of talk through some of the structure of it, just so that the committee members can understand how this is sort of structured and how we've come to some of the assessments that are included within the actual report itself. So if you go into the Appendix 1 of the report, and I'll sort of make references to the paragraph numbers, I think rather than sort of page numbers would be an easier way to track this. So the first sort of couple of sections are really just giving you a bit of blurb, if you like, around the actual reasons behind the annual governance statement. The way that we structure it here is done through a document produced by SIPFA and by Solace, which is called the Delivering Good Governance in Local Government Framework. And the report is structured around some sort of key areas presented in that report. And just to be absolutely clear, the annual governance statement is something that we have to produce in order to meet the Accounts and Audit England Regulations 2015. So it's very much sort of tied up within legislation. Section 2 really talks about the sort of the purpose of the governance statement again. So it just talks a lot about the sort of system of internal controls. It talks about key business processes and what we actually have in place in order to make sure that we're sort of managing the business effectively. Section 3 then sets out the key business processes. So we've got a number of bullets here, and I won't read through these, but you can see we're covering things like, for example, consultation and engagement, asset management is picked up in there, things like risk management, data quality, workforce management, project management, etc., etc. So that's very much the sort of structure around we're kind of basing these assessments. As I mentioned before, ordinarily there would be two annual governance reports, which would come into the audit committee. And then there is a process that we go through where we ask managers across the council to produce something called manager assurance statements, where they then go through and do a kind of a self-assessment against all of these business processes. And then we have a good governance group, this is paragraph 3.4, which comprises of officers, including my colleague, Mr. Andrew Barnes, the head of internal audit. And we go through and we basically challenge these assessments to make sure that people aren't being perhaps over-optimistic in some of their assessments in terms of the way that they think they're kind of managing things across these key processes. And then having done that process, we then come to an assessment as a good governance group, a collective assessment, in terms of how we feel the organisation is effectively performing against each of these key business processes. So the table which comes across, it basically starts paragraph 3.5, and then you've got the table on the following page there. What I've done this year, and it hasn't been done in sort of previous years, but I just wanted to show, I think, a bit of a sort of comparison between one year and the next, just to sort of give you an idea, I suppose, and a bit of a sense of progress, or perhaps a sense of where we are with this. Now, I think on first reflection, you know, I think that the committee members will look at this and be like, hang on a second, there's a lot of things that we said were satisfactory last year, which actually are now coming up as partial. And I think I just wanted to give a bit of sort of context behind that. So for each of these partial assessments later on in the report, you'll see the reasons behind those, and happy to sort of take questions on some of those views and assessments. But I think this is very much in the context of the kind of the challenge across the organisation. You know, you can use metaphors like shaking the tree or turning over rocks, etc. But I think what we really wanted to do, I think in light of stuff that is going on across the sector, across local government, in terms of sort of where poor governance comes to light and the impact of that, wanted to take a really kind of quite sort of harsh, I guess, assessment, you know, against all of these different areas, which I think is where we've probably said, actually, on reflection, you know, we probably should be doing a little bit more in these areas. So that's the reason for those, as opposed to, you know, an organisation in freefall. And I just wanted to be absolutely sort of clear about that, that this actually should be seen as a good thing, because we're really taking these things seriously. And I think where there are issues that we know need to be addressed, we're absolutely fronting those and being open and honest about and transparent about those. So that's what the table is. So that'll give you kind of a bit of a summary, if you like, in terms of where we are. I think what I'm not going to do, because you've obviously had the report and there's quite a lot of detail in there, but effectively section 4 onwards will then take you through the SIPFA framework, so these different principles, and again, that's how we've organised this. But I've highlighted or emboldened the sort of like the key business processes, and giving you a sort of an idea of why we've arrived at this assessment against each of those. So that carries on over a number of pages, and as I say, I'm happy to sort of take questions on any aspects of those towards the end. So that sort of runs through sort of paragraph, you know, 4.3. When it goes on, it goes on, it goes on. But it's really, really good, important information in there, and a really good sort of overall assessment of how things were carried out over 2022-23 financial year. So I guess probably the only other things to kind of flag really in terms of the structure of the report. So moving on to paragraph 4.56, a little bit further on in the document, there's a section there which is written by internal audit. So again, Mr. Barnes would have written that particular section of it, and that's sort of reflecting on his views in terms of the governance and the system of control that we have across the organisation. There's a little bit in there about external audit, really more for sort of information than anything else. And then finally at paragraph 4.7, there's just a bit about external inspections, because that's obviously another key source of assurance. If we have other external bodies coming in and inspecting the council, there were no external inspections carried out in 22-23, so that's why that section is effectively blank, but it's remaining in there just to sort of remind you that there is that aspect to our assurance process. And then just the last two things just to point out really. 4.71, you've got a table on the next page, and that is progress against some of the recommendations that were identified in last year's annual governance statement. So that would have been for the 21-22 financial year, and just some progress against some of those. You'll see in a number of cases those have rolled into 23-24. In some cases that was because audit work that was related to the activity hadn't concluded, and therefore we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose that and pick it up in the action plan for this particular year. And then others just to do with things like capacity and just basically not being able to get some of the stuff done, but important again not to lose those actions, so they have rolled over. So 4.71 is the table for last year, and then finally 4.72 is the table covering the areas that have been identified as partial. Basically it's the areas identified as partial and what we propose to do to address those and hopefully move those towards satisfactory when we're reporting on the annual governance statement for the 23-24 financial year, which I'll be reporting at this time next year. So again, there's some detail in those tables there, and as we've done in previous years, we'll make sure that those monitoring reports actually pick up progress against the actions within this table itself. So there'll be two further reports, one in the autumn and another in spring, and then we'll be back to the annual governance statement next year. So thank you for giving me the time just to present that, but I just wanted to make sure that, that the committee members were sort of clear about the purpose of the report and some of the key aspects of it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Good to see a nice, open, transparent report, something we can monitor closely through the action plan. Anybody have any comments? Councillor May.
Thanks for that, Ben. One thing I've got a little issue on, health and safety. Satisfactory, I don't think is good enough anyway. On health and safety, we should be going for high. And then to see that we've gone to partial, I find that a little bit worrying.
So again, I think in the interest of sort of openness and transparency here, we want to be absolutely sort of clear where we thought the organisation was in terms of health and safety. And I think to sort of give some assurance that that the kind of processes, there are processes in place. We have a competent person, as it says. This is paragraph 4.46 here. We had no incidents that were required to be reported under something called RIDDLE, which is the reporting of injuries, disease and dangerous occurrences regulations. I think that's a good thing to note. I think the reason for the partial in this particular one was just around, I think, the need to carry out a slightly more sort of comprehensive and holistic piece of work relating to a couple of things. First of all, e-learning completion rates. So we all sort of, as officers, have an obligation to undertake various sort of health and safety training. And I don't think the completion rates on that are probably quite as high as they should be. That said, principally they would be for office-based staff as opposed to people like refuse loaders, for example, not doing their health and safety, because that wouldn't happen, because we absolutely need to make sure they've covered those. The second was really just around the overall look at the kind of health and safety policies in the round. So we have, policies that exist in different parts of the organisation, kind of corporately, out with the refuse and recycling team, within the leisure centres, for example. And I think we're using this as an opportunity to do a complete look at all of that and just make sure that those sort of policies are kind of up to date, that those policies are appropriate for the organisation and the activities that we do. So that was the reason behind the partial one. So I totally take your point about actually satisfactory not being good enough, but equally I think we wanted to raise that and flag that as partial, because we just sort of appreciate that it's a really important area of work, and we just absolutely want to make sure that we get it right.
Yeah. See, because another reason why I've brought this up is, obviously, I've got to say I've got an interest because I live on Canvey Island, but obviously it's a major floodplain, area, but then we've also got 2 major coma sites. So obviously, you know, we get health and safety thrown at us all the time, and that's why I think that, you know, health and safety should be a priority to go high.
Further questions? Councillor Edwards?
Just looking at I mean, you've identified a number of items that have carried over from last year, and we've got some others that have shifted, as you said, probably due to, you know, imposing higher thresholds this year, which is welcome. But can I ask the brutal question, have these been ordered in priority by analysing the risks, sort of likelihood and impact, or are the delivery dates based on pragmatic achievability?
That's a very good question. So I think in most cases you've got the responsible officer there, and I think that the dates that have been sort of offered here are basically, I think, designed to be challenging, but actually not being unrealistic. And I think the issue that we have around a lot of this sort of stuff, I think, is around the sort of capacity to move some of this particular work on. I think it's something that the transforming programme that's already been talked about tonight will help to sort of clarify some of those responsibilities in terms of these pieces of work. So, but in terms of the actual risk side of things, that's something that myself and Andrew and the chief executive have been talking about in terms of actually how do we develop a risk programme and a programme of audits based around all the stuff that we talk about within the annual governance statement, and therefore those audits will be undertaken, correct me if I'm wrong, on more of a risk-based process. So where there is an area there is a higher risk, that will be looked at before the stuff that is slightly lower risk.
I had a particular driver because of my own biases, which is seeing that the IT one is quite a long way down. And I think you've seen from experience of London councils that if we had a major cybersecurity incident, we would have a lot of other problems.
Yeah. No, okay. I mean, noted on that particular one. I think on the cybersecurity side of things, I think there's been some good progress, but absolutely, again, that will be something that I think is going to be looked at and picked up through the audit programme. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. In regard to 4.25 onwards, you talk about the removal of the last local plan in preparation of the new Castle Point plan. In regard to any speculative plan application come forward and refused and go to appeal, is obviously the smaller sites, we just had one and lost one, but if the bigger sites come forward, is there adequate things in place to fight these as hard as possible? I know with previous ones they've been arguably not defended strongly enough, and it's a big issue. If you're doing a new local plan, a new Castle Point plan, do you want to defend it as what you're trying to protect as strongly as possible?
I mean, I think the reason why the Castle Point plan is mentioned in here is because this comes under this SIP principle D, which is around determining the intervention necessary to optimise achievements of intended outcomes. Clearly, a lot of the stuff that will be in the in the Castle Point plan as being developed now is going to be a key document and a key strategy document for sort of helping the council deliver a lot of the sort of stuff that it would have under its priorities. In terms of specifics around sort of the mechanisms behind being able to sort of defend things, it's certainly beyond my sort of knowledge, if you like, of the sort of the planning world, and probably not a question that I think would be answering sort of here in relation to this particular report. But I guess again with these things, if we can take something away and get a response or something from one of the planning team, if that's something you'd be interested in getting, I'm sure we can arrange that.
Thank you. But it was previously in previous plans there was a budget set aside for that, and I think that's gone there, isn't it?
The Chief Exec would like to.
Thank you, Chair, through you. There is a reserve set aside, which is a general contingency, because as a public authority, we are always susceptible to judicial review or other challenge. So we always have sufficient reserves to manage that. There isn't a special ring-fenced reserve that's related to defending planning appeals, but we are confident and comfortable. In fact, the budget setting in February dealt with that specific question, Councillor Hart, that there are sufficient reserves to enable us to deal with that in the eventuality that it occurs.
Thank you. Who decides the amount of legal representation that the council sends on specific appeal applications?
That's a decision undertaken by the solicitor to the council in conjunction with the subject matter experts who will be the officers supporting the actual case itself.
So it's our legal department, you said. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, anyone? Okay, thank you very much. Is the recommendation agreed? Agreed. Item 7, Internal Audit and Charter Plan. Mr. Barnes, your report for the forthcoming year, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is our report to the committee on the approach to delivering the internal audit service for the council and demonstrates how we comply with the public sector internal audit standards and tells you the specific internal audit work that we're planning to take or proposing to take during 23-24 financial year and how this will provide assurance to the committee in respect of the council's corporate risks. I'm afraid there's quite a lot of material required by the standards, so as a result we have three key documents. There's a charter that explains what internal audit is and what it is for, which is Appendix 1. We have a strategy that explains how we then go about delivering that, which is Appendix 2. We have a plan that explains the specific audit work we propose to undertake during the year, which is Appendix 2A, and a table showing how that planned work contributes to providing assurance over the council's management of its corporate risks, which is Appendix 2B. The key document for the committee to consider really is the plan at Appendix 2A, which begins on page 93. This reports the audits we consider will provide assurance in the most valuable areas for the council in the forthcoming year, given the risks that it's facing. We've mapped this to the risks on the corporate risk register as it stands at Appendix 2B. Hopefully the committee agree that our proposed work is targeting the right risks and issues, but I'd be happy to receive any feedback or comments the committee have. That's all I really want to say, Chair, but happy to try to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Barnes? Thank you, Andrew. It makes sense to focus on the council's transformation bits you've got in your report there. As there's no questions, is the recommendation agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 8. This item needs to be considered as private business. The committee is asked to agree the resolution to exclude the press and the public, which has been circulated. Is this agreed? Can we stop the live stream, please?